it must have been Jinshi. What would have happened if consort R Duo had been in Jinshi's position? But it was a silly question, not worth thinking about. R Duo did not appear like a pitiful reject being chased out of the rear palace. She walked with her head high and her chest out. One could even say she had the triumphant look of a woman who had done her duty. How could she look so proud? How, when she had never done the one thing a consort must do? Maomao suddenly realized something absurd was possible. R Duo's words from the night before returned to her. He had said, "Ever since my son slipped away from me." Now Maomao thought about it. Slipped away, not died. It was almost as if the consort meant her son was still alive. R Duo could no longer have children. This was because she delivered at the same time as the Empress Dowager. The imperial younger brother and the consort's child were uncle and nephew. They had been born almost at the exact same time. It was possible they had looked almost like twins. What if they had been switched at birth? Even as she was giving birth, consort R Duo would have known with absolute certainty which of the two infants would be the more diligently raised and the more treasured. The very best support a child could receive would not come from R Duo, the daughter of a wet nurse, but support from an Empress Dowager would be different. It could not have been easy for R Duo. Her recovery after the birth had been slow, and she wasn't sure what was right. But if making the switch might save her own son, it would be understandable if she wished for such a thing. And what if it came to light later? What if the true imperial younger brother was already dead by then? Then it would make sense why Maomao's father had been not only banished, but also mutilated. He had failed to notice the infants had been switched. This explained why His Majesty's younger brother led such a constrained life. It also explained why R Duo, otherwise chaste, had remained in the rear palace for so long. Bah, this is ridiculous. Maomao shook her head. It was an outrageous fantasy. Even her fellow ladies in waiting at the Jade Pavilion would think it was a leap. Maomao thought there was no point in staying there. She was just about to head back to the Jade Pavilion when she saw someone coming toward her in a rush. It was the sweet-looking young consort Lishu. She showed no sign of having noticed Maomao, but she ran toward the main gate. Her food taster trailed behind her, gasping for breath. Her other ladies in waiting came behind them, not running at all, and they looked thoroughly annoyed by the entire scene. Some people never change. Well, I guess at least one of them has. It wasn't as if Maomao could do anything about it. Someone who couldn't manage her own people wouldn't survive in this garden of women. But now she wasn't alone. That was at least heartening. Consort Lishu appeared before consort R Duo. Her arms and legs moved awkwardly together, almost mechanically. She was tripping on the hem of her own dress and presently tumbled headlong to the ground. As the crowd attempted to suppress its laughter, and consort Lishu lay there looking like she might cry, R Duo took out a handkerchief. She gently helped the young woman wipe the dirt off her face. In that moment the face of the handsome young consort was that of a loving mother. Chapter 31 Dismissal. What am I going to do? Jinshi gazed mournfully at the paper. What do you wish to do? His taciturn aide asked, likewise looking at the document. The situation was enough to make any man despair. Gaoshan observed, this is a list of names. He continued, these are Fengeming's family and their known associates. Fengeming was already dead. Her clan and family relations would be spared total annihilation, but her relatives were to be subject to the confiscation of all their assets. Each of them would also be punished with mutilation, though the severity would vary. Jinshi could be grateful, at least, that there had been no sign of any instructions from consort R Duo. Fengeming was to be considered as acting alone. Among her associates were several clients who used her family's services. Jinshi had always thought of the clan as simple beekeepers, but they seemed to have their hands in quite a few ventures. Gaoshan remarked that 80 of their girls served at the rear palace. He clarified that this was 80 out of 2,000. A respectable ratio, I should say so, Gaoshan said, watching his master furrow his brow. Shall they be discharged? Can that be done, if you wish it? If he wished it, Gaoshan would see it done. Whatever Jinshi told him, he would accomplish it, whether it was right or not. Just or not, Jinshi sighed, a long, slow exhalation of breath. He recognized at least one of the names on the list of associates. They were the purchasers of a kidnapped apothecary's daughter. What to do about this, he mused. All he had to do was choose. But he sat in fear of how she would look at him, depending on what he decided to do. It was so simple to give an order, but how would she take it if it was contrary to what she wanted? Maomao saw the divide between herself and Jinshi as that between a commoner and a noble. He suspected she would ultimately accept any command, no matter how distasteful, but he thought it would make the gulf between them that much wider. To send her away, he hesitated. She was not here voluntarily, that much was true, but could he end her service on a whim? And what if the ever-perceptive girl caught a whiff of it? Master Jinshi, Gaoshan said as Jinshi turned the questions over and over in his mind. Was she not a very fortuitous pawn? His aide's words were coldly rational. Jinshi ran a hand across his brow. A mass dismissal. Yep, Xiaolan said, munching on a dried persimmon. Maomao had taken a few persimmons from the fruit orchard. She then carefully hung them under the eaves of the jade pavilion to dry. If anyone had noticed, she would have been in trouble. As a matter of fact, she was in trouble. Hongyang would certainly notice the fruit. Gaoshan arrived at just the right moment to save her. When Hongyang discovered he was quite fond of persimmons, she said she would let it go this one time, with a conspiratorial wink. She said, I guess it's like you know how sometimes they slaughter everyone related to a case like this. All the girls from the merchant houses we have dealings with will have to quit. That is what I heard. Xiaolan's explanation was not very clear, but Maomao nodded. I'm not sure I like where this is going. She had a bad feeling about it. And her bad feelings often proved to be accurate. Maomao's family was a business and sometimes engaged in commerce. Fengeming's family were beekeepers, so there could be a connection between the two families. It would be tough on me if they fired me now, Maomao thought. She was also beginning to enjoy her life here. It was true she would be happy to return home to the pleasure district. However, once she arrived, she would find herself in the grasp of the old madam. This woman would not let even the smallest coin go unnoticed. Maomao still had not sent her any customers since Lehaku's visit. This fact would not have escaped her calculating mind. She really will start selling me this time. Maomao said goodbye to Xiaolan, then set off to find a person she would normally have had no interest in seeing. How unusual. And you are breathing so hard, the gorgeous eunuch said lightly. They stood by the main gate of the rear palace. Maomao had just arrived there after visiting the residences of all four of the favoured consorts. She struggled to muster a biting riposte, but Jinshi said, calm down. You're bright red. A shadow of alarm crossed the nymph-like face. I have to talk to you, Maomao managed between gasps. Jinshi almost seemed to smile, and yet for some reason she couldn't guess there was a hint of melancholy in his expression too. Very well. Let's speak inside. She felt a little bad for the matron of the serving women. For the first time in a while, the matron was forced to wait outside, while Maomao and Jinshi used her office. Maomao gave the woman a polite bow as she passed. It seemed she had been terribly busy of late handling our duo's departure. By the time Maomao got inside, Jinshi was already sitting in a chair. He was eyeing a piece of paper on the desk. I presume you wanted to ask me about the mass dismissal taking place. Yes, sir. What is to happen to me? Instead of answering, Jinshi showed her the paper. The fabric was made of excellent material. Maomao's name was among those listed on it. So I am to be let go, she thought. What should she do? She could hardly insist they keep her on. She was keenly aware that she was just an ordinary serving woman. She carefully kept her face neutral. She did not want to show even a hint of flattery. However, the result was that she looked at Jinshi exactly as she always did. It was as though she were staring at a caterpillar. What do you want to do? Jinshi's voice did not have its usual honeyed tone. He almost seemed like a pleading child. In fact, his voice sounded just as it had the night before Consort Arduo left. His face, however, remained frozen and grave. He said he was only a servant. At a word, he could be put to menial labour, to cooking. She even tasted food for poison. She was only telling the truth. If she was ordered to do something, she would do it as long as it was within her power. She liked to think she would do it well. She wouldn't complain, even if she had to take a bit of a pay cut. She would do whatever it took to get new customers if it meant avoiding having to sell her body. So please do not let me go. Maomao felt she had said as clearly as possible, let me stay. But the young man's expression remained unmoved. He offered only a small exhalation, his eyes flitting away for the barest second. Very well, he said. I'll make sure you receive adequate compensation. The young man's voice was cold, and he looked down at the desk so she couldn't read his expression. The negotiations had failed. How many days now, Gae-shun wondered with a sigh, had his master been cagey and withdrawn? It was not interfering with his work, but when they returned to his room, he would only sit in a corner brooding. Gae-shun was frankly getting a little tired of it. Jinshi was casting a cloud over the entire place. The boy with the enchanting smile and the captivating voice was not there. Maomao had left the week after receiving official notice of her dismissal. She had never been overly warm, but she was also never rude. She went from place to place in the rear palace to formally thank all her various acquaintances and benefactors. Consort Jaikayu had been openly opposed to Maomao's dismissal. However, when she heard the decision came from Jinshi, she did not continue to push the matter. She did leave him with a final remark. Do not come crying to me if you find out you wish you hadn't done this. Are you certain you should not have stopped her, sir? Do not say a word. Gae-shun crossed his arms and frowned. A memory from the past came back to him. There was much strife when the young man lost a favorite toy. Gae-shun had suffered to give him something newer and more enticing still. Perhaps he shouldn't think of her as a toy. Perhaps Jinshi had chosen not to stop her as his way of refusing to treat her as an object. What point would it serve then to find some other remarkable lady? It all portended a great deal of trouble. Gae-shun murmured, if no substitute will do, the only recourse is to the original, so quietly that Jinshi did not hear him. One person in particular flashed through his mind. A military officer was well acquainted with the girl's family. He said, a great deal of trouble though it is. The long-suffering Gae-shun scratched the back of his neck. Epilogue: the eunuch and the courtesan. Time to work. Get going. The old madam hustled Maomao into a rather distinguished-looking carriage. This evening's job was a banquet for a noble. Maomao sighed as they arrived at a large mansion in the north of the capital. She was one of many people accompanying her sisters to the banquet. Everyone was dressed in gorgeous clothing and wore ostentatious makeup. When she considered the fact that she was made up to look just like them, Maomao felt oddly queasy. Their party was ushered down a long hallway. They went up a spiral staircase and into a large room. Lanterns hung from the ceiling. Festive red tassels dangled everywhere. Someone has money to burn, Maomao thought. 5 people sat in a row in the room. They were younger than she had expected. Perrin licked her lips when she saw the young men in the flickering lamplight. She was rewarded with a gentle jab in the side from Joker. When she wanted to, Maomao's sexy sister could be very quick about things. It was quick enough to make even the madam throw up her hands. He should have made these introductions sooner. The men at this banquet were supposedly high officials from the palace. Lihaku had been the go-between. And with him involved, at least a portion of the profits should go toward paying off Maomao's debts. She had been given a substantial amount of severance pay, more than she had counted on. This allowed her to escape being forced to sell her body, but the madam still put her to odd jobs like this. Old hag. The way she clucked when she heard, the old lady really seemed to want to make Maomao a courtesan. She had been maneuvering toward it for years now. She kept telling Maomao to stop wasting her time with medicine, but that was never going to happen. Was she simply going to swap her interest from pharmaceuticals to singing and dancing? Not a chance. As Maomao took in the room, she saw that everything was hugely ornate. Each bottle of wine and every sitting mat was of the highest quality. Surely they wouldn't notice if I helped myself to a furnishing as a souvenir, she thought. Then she shook her head. No, that wouldn't do. Calling courtesans to one's private residence was substantially more expensive than holding a banquet at the brothel. The situation was even more striking considering the courtesans one summoned were women who could each charge a year's wages in silver for a single evening. To ask all 3 of the princesses of the Verdigris house, Maomao, Perrin and Joker, to be present at once, was a clear announcement that money was no object. Maomao was simply one of those brought along to support the knight's 3 stars. She had learned to be mannerly, but she could not hold a tune. She also could not play the erhu, and dancing was out of the question. The best she could hope for was to keep a close watch on the guests' drinks and make sure they never ran dry. Maomao forced the muscles of her face into a smile as she began to pour wine into someone's empty cup. Her saving grace was that everyone was so enraptured by her sisters, singing and dancing. They didn't so much as glance at her. One person had even started a game of Go with a member of the support staff. While everyone else laughed, drank, and enjoyed the show, she spotted one person looking down at the ground. What bored, Maomao wondered. He was a young man dressed in fine silk. He rested a small cup of wine on one knee, sipping from it occasionally. A grey gloom clung to him. They're going to think I'm not doing my job, thought Maomao. She had a way of turning serious about anything she happened to be doing. She grabbed a good full bottle of wine and sat down beside the melancholy young man. His sleek dark bangs hid much of his face. She could not see his expression for the life of her. "Leave me alone," he said. Maomao was puzzled. His voice was oddly familiar to her. Her hand moved quickly, almost before she could think. Any thought of propriety or politeness had vanished from her mind. She was careful not to touch the young man's cheek as she lifted his hair. A gorgeous face greeted her. Her reserved expression promptly changed to one of total astonishment. Master Jinchi. There was no gleaming smile on his face now and no sweet honey in his voice, but she would have known that eunuch anywhere. Jinchi blinked several times in succession. He studied her for a second, then said uneasily, Who are you? A question I am often asked. Has anyone ever told you that you look very different with makeup? Frequently. The conversation gave her a sense of déjà vu. She let go of his hair and it fell back over his face. Jinchi reached out and tried to take her wrist. Why are you running? He looked sullen now. Please do not touch the entertainment, she said. It was not her decision. It was the rules. They would have to charge extra. Why the hell do you even look like that? Maomao refused to meet his eyes as she said uncomfortably, It's part-time work, at a brothel. Wait, don't tell me you. Maomao gave Jinchi a glare. So he liked to question people's chastity, did he? I don't take customers myself, she informed him. Yet Maomao didn't elaborate. What could she say? It certainly wasn't outside the realm of possibility that the madam would finally manage to force a customer on her before she was able to pay off her debt. Thankfully she hadn't experienced it yet, thanks to her father and sisters. How about if I bought you? Jinchi said slowly. Maomao was about to tell him not to joke when an idea came to her. You know, that might not be so bad. Jinchi caught his breath, surprised. It was the face of a pigeon startled by a pea-shooter. It seemed the lack of sparkle allowed for a great wealth of expressions. Lovely though the ethereal smile was, it almost didn't look human. It was nearly enough to convince Maomao that he must have 2 hun spirits within a single Po spirit. That is, 2 transient yang souls for the single corporeal yin spirit. It wouldn't be so bad to work at the rear palace again, she said. Jinchi's shoulders slumped. Maomao looked at him, wondering what the matter was. She thought he had quit the rear palace because he hated it. When did I ever say such a thing? In fact, Maomao was convinced she had all but begged to stay on in order to pay off her debt. It had been Jinchi who had her fired. The place had its troubles and difficulties, no question, but Consort Jayakayu's ladies-in-waiting had been good women. And food taster was an unusual role, not one to which most people could or would aspire. If there's anything I didn't like about it, Maomao said, I suppose it would be that I wasn't able to conduct my poison experiments. You shouldn't be doing those anyway. Jinchi rested his chin on his knee in place of his cup. His look of outright exasperation spontaneously slipped into a wry smile. He said, I know it's who you are. I'm afraid I don't follow you, she responded. Has anyone ever told you that you are a woman of few words? Perhaps too few, Maomao replied after a beat. Often Jinchi's smile grew more innocent. This time Maomao looked annoyed. Jinchi reached out again. I said, why are you running? It's the rules, sir. The information did not seem to dissuade Jinchi. His hand did not move. He was staring fixedly at Maomao. She was getting a bad feeling about it. Surely one touch is all right. No, sir, there won't be any less of you afterward. It takes my energy, just one hand, just a fingertip. Surely that's all right. Maomao had no answer. He was persistent. She knew him. She knew he didn't give up. Maomao, helpless, closed her eyes and let out a deep breath. She said, just a fingertip. The instant the words were out of her mouth, she felt something press against her lips. Her eyelids fluttered open and she saw a daub of her red lip color on Jinchi's lithe fingertip. He pulled his hand back almost before she realized what had happened. Then, to her amazement, he touched his finger to his own lips. That sneaky little thing. When he pulled his fingers away from his mouth, a spot of scarlet was left on his finely shaped mouth. His face relaxed a little, and the smile became even more innocent. A flush entered his cheeks, as if a touch of lip color had gotten on his face. Maomao's shoulders were shaking. Jinchi's smile looked so profoundly youthful, almost childish, that she found she could not rebuke him.